When I was 13 years old, I had that baby fuzz on my upper lip. Most Hispanic boys my age were wearing it as a badge of their newfound macho manhood. But not me. I thought it made my nose look big. I thought it made me look like a spick. So the summer before high school, I asked my mother if she could teach me how to shave. It wasn't easy to ask because I felt horribly self-conscious about any signs of puberty. Mostly because I was always under the microscope of my grandmother, Maria Antonia, also known as Mima. Mima and her viejas would inspect me like I was a new stud in the stables ready for breeding. ¡Ay, pero qué grande está ese muchacho! ¡Qué cuerpazo! ¡Qué mono! He's so big. Look at that body. He's so cute. They would poke at me, grab my arms, and squeeze my little man biceps. ¡Ay, pero qué fuerte! Seguro que tienes las muchachas alborotadas. He drives the girls crazy. I would sink into my shoulders to go unnoticed as I walked to the kitchen past Mima and La Fulanas. In the afternoons, they assembled at the dining room table reading about the royals in Hola magazine and the telenovela stars in Spanish Cosmo. As I slipped by, Mima would grab the new hairs on my legs and say to her friends, "Seguro que tiene los huevos peludos." For sure, this boy has hairy balls. I don't know if it's a Cuban thing or what, but Mima always talked about the size of my balls as a measure of what I was too old or not old enough to do. You are too huevón to be acting like a child. You are not huevón enough to be out all night. With Mom, it was equally embarrassing. One time, I developed a little cyst on the top of my tailbone right in the crack of my ass. It hurt like hell. So Mom called a friend who was a nurse. She told her about the cyst and then held the phone away from her ear. "Mickey, she says it's an ingrown hair." Then into the phone, Mom says, "Oh yeah, his father was hairy." "Hold on, let me ask him. Mickey, do you have hair around your poo-poo hole?" So, with hair on my legs, and my balls, and my asshole, the one place I still had some measure of control was my upper lip. And I wanted those hairy bastards shaved off. The only thing was, I didn't know how. So as uncomfortable as it made me, I asked Mom to teach me. She gave me a pink bottle of strawberry-scented lather that she used to shave her legs, and a Lady Chic disposable razor. She told me, put the lather on my face, and as I did, she started to giggle. I said, don't laugh at me, which of course made her laugh even more. She told me, hold my nose and pull down my upper lip and shave from the top to the bottom. And then she got quiet. With half a shaved baby mustache and with the pink razor in my hand, I looked away from the mirror and glanced at her. She stood in the doorway, looking solemn. I asked, what's wrong? She said, you should have a father for this. My mother was still pregnant with my sister when my parents split up. I was 4 years old. My mom married and divorced a second time before I was 13. As overly involved as the women in my life were regarding my puberty, the men in my life offered no interest or advice. As embarrassing as it would have been, I wished I had someone to give me the talk. I wished I had someone to explain to me how to be a man. My father, a minister, never once spoke to me about sex until I came out of the closet when I was 17. When I told him, he sent me quotes from Leviticus and a book written for the youth of his assembly. I remember 2 pages. One was an illustration of the whore of Babylon riding the 7-headed beast from hell. The other was an illustration of a bunch of guys in tight clothes dancing and shooting up drugs. Under the picture was the caption, homosexuality. My stepfather had no real influence on my coming of age, except for his stash of hot rod magazines from the 70s, with the almost naked, big-boobed women sprawled on the hoods of the cars. But I wasn't interested in those. The greatest male influence by default was my grandfather, Osvaldo Antonio, also known as Pipo. Pipo never asked if I had questions or sat me down for the talk. The only mention of sex at all was while discussing his mistress. I understood my grandparents had a less than ideal marriage, and I never reproached them for being unfaithful. There was my grandparents, and there was my grandfather and his girlfriend. His only explanation? A man has needs. Many years later, after both my mom and my grandmother had died, Pipo and I were driving to my sister's for Noche Buena. Out of nowhere, Pipo said, in Cuba, in the old days, we knew that men were maricón, but they got married anyway and had a man on the side. ¿Por qué no te cases y tengas un hombre al lado? Why can't you get married and have a man on the side? I didn't know what to make of it. Part of me was angry at such an antiquated notion. How could he suggest that I cheat the way he had? On the other hand, it was the first time after being out for 15 years he ever acknowledged that I was gay. It was the first time he acknowledged me. Before I could say anything, he took a breath and said, I just don't want you to be alone. my grandfather, survived the loss of his only child and his wife, so I could appreciate what was behind his words. Maybe it wasn't the talk I always wanted. It was better.